good old Mountain Dew. My brother Bill runs a still on the hill where he'll run you a gallon or two. The buzzards in the sky get so drunk that they can't fly from the fumes of that good old Mountain Dew. They call it that good old Mountain Dew.
Full name?
Full name, William L. Pace.
And Roy, your full name one more time, please.
Roy Lee Johnson, Jr.
Okay. And Roy, if you don't mind, what's your date of birth?
January 28th, 1943.
Okay. And where were you born?
I was born in Hendersonville.
Okay. And your current address, just the town you live in?
Is East Flat Rock.
Okay. And Bill, what was your date of birth?
October the 24th, 22.
Okay. And where were you born?
What?
Where were you born?
Hendersonville.
Okay. And do you also live in Flat Rock?
Yeah.
Now? Okay. Now you two are brothers?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you half brothers? Or
Yeah.
You're half brothers. Okay.
Well, they say we're half brothers, but we're brothers.
I understand completely. My daughter would say the same thing about her.
Because two halves makes a whole.
There you go. Can one of you all tell us your parents' names?
What? Your daddy's name?
I'm a junior.
And your mom?
Alice, what, your maiden name?
Her name, her maiden name.
Her maiden name was Anders, Alice Anders.
Okay, all right.
And my dad was Roy Lee Johnson, Sr., and Mama was Alice Anders Johnson.
Okay, all right. So now, do you all have a deep connection to Saluda as far as your family genealogy and your history? Are you all of the Johnson family that's the Saluda Johnson family, or?
Well, my dad and my grandpa all grew up and lived in Saluda. I don't know a whole lot about their past, their grandpa's past. I guess as you get older, you get more interested in it, and I wish I'd have sat down and talked to my grandpa more and found out more about. I'd like to know where he met his wife, and I've been trying to get her grave site fixed up. I bought Grandpa a tombstone for him and her, and I've got part of the dates on, and I'm still missing some of the dates. I'm not sure exactly. I don't know when she was born.
Where are they buried?
In Friendship.
Friendship.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Did your grandfather have much of an education, or did he not?
Yeah.
I didn't think he had a chance to back.
My daddy told me one time that when he was young, his daddy's mama died when he was, I think he was just 5, 6 years old, something like real young. And he had an older sister and a younger sister. And Grandpa raised them all by himself. And Daddy told me one time, he said, most of the time he was growing up, about all he had to eat was molasses and cornbread. They about survived on molasses and cornbread. But they made it and did fairly well.
And the Baxter-Johnson House was on Shan Hill.
Yeah.
We got a picture of that in our
Yeah, I saw
city.
that in one of those books. Yeah.
Okay. Now, Bill, are you from the Pace family of Saluda? Are you part of that Pace family?
Am I a member of the Pace family?
Are you part of that Saluda Pace family?
Well, my daddy was, that's the way I'm related to him. See, there was 4. My dad and Cecil Pace, who lived in Tuxedo, and Aunt Tisha and Aunt Nana. There was 2 girls and 2 boys. And that's the only Pace I'm related to.
Okay. Do you know who your grandfather's name that was a Pace?
what was his name? I can't remember. I just barely remember him. He left us down there where the old reservoir used to be for the city of Saluda was sold. He sold that to the city for a reservoir. There's a little lake down there. And when he died, he left me. I was a youngster, but he left it to me I could have when I got 21, which I got. And later sold it, but it joined where that reservoir was and went way out in the mountains. I think it was about 20 acres.
Doesn't that connect up Mount Page?
It's down at the end of Packard Street.
So it does connect with Pace property.
And the old home place where my daddy grew up and all of them, the old house was there just before you got to the lake.
Okay.
But,
so, Charlene, do you know what branch of the Pace family he comes from? Okay.
Know what I found out?
Yeah.
that was it's about, I'd say a mile and a half from the Mountain Page Road. You go down to where it was at.
So, what was your grandfather's name?
I was trying to think, can't remember.
You can't remember, okay.
I can't.
We can look it up for you. We'll do that later. All right. When you think of his name, you let us know.
Okay.
Okay. So, you don't live in Saluda now, but you both grew up or lived here a long time, and you both still, from what I can gather, you both still love Saluda and care a lot about Saluda. Do you want to tell us some interesting stories about being here? I'll let you all kind of decide which way you want to go with this. Do you want to talk? Do you want to talk about the century-old fire?
I want to talk about what?
The century-old fire.
Huh?
The century-old fire.
Oh, I just remember being down there talking to him for quite some time.
Now, his
I was a
name
teenager.
Billy Morris, right?
Yeah.
Everybody called him Uncle Billy Morris.
Okay.
And I remember that it'd been there so long, it was just a kind of a bowl burned out down in the ground. And I've often thought of that a lot. But I'd heard so much talk about it that I wanted to go down and see it. And later years, I don't know whether it was Walter Cronkite or one of the other famous TV personality announcer. Anyway, they had a program called Believe It or Not. And Mr. Morris went to that program. They paid his expenses, and they interviewed him on television. And some relative took care of the fire while he was away.
That's We the People program in New York.
Yeah. But I don't know whether Walter Cronkite or what is that other, can't think of his name, but they had this show on TV. And it was Believe It or Not, I believe the name of the show. And he was interviewed by this Walter Cronkite or whoever it was. All about his dad started the fire and he kept it going and so forth.
My dad took me down there. I must have been about 5, I guess, 5 or 6. And I remember going in, and like he said, the fire, it was kind of warm, but he had just the coals going in it.
Yeah.
The fireplace was just hollered out.
Yeah.
And he had a dog. It looked mostly like a collie. And that old dog was laying by the fire. and Daddy asked him, there was a fiddle hanging on the wall. And my daddy asked him if he'd play us a tune, and he got that fiddle down and played that fiddle. And I remember doing that, and that's all. And I think it probably, from a book I've got a John Parrish book that's got a story about him. And looking at that, he must have died probably the next year after I was down there, because I think he died in the winter of 49, 50. And so I must have been down there either in 48 or early 49.
What did you think as a young child? What did you think of that?
I thought that was neat, boy. I couldn't get over, and I couldn't really understand at that time how a fire had been going for 100 years. And then later I understand how it come about.
So let's see, so would it have been his grandfather that started the fire? Do you know
I'm not sure.
I think it was his dad.
His dad?
I'd have to look. It may say in that John Parrish book. But I know when he come to that cabin, anybody would move like that and carry fire. They carry coals in a big old pot and cover it with ashes, and shoot, those coals would stay hot for days, and they could carry them from one place to another and start the fire from there.
Didn't they cook on the fireplace?
I think so.
They cooked on the fireplace, so it was year round.
So I was going to say, was it year round? It was year round, if it never went out?
It never went out.
There's somewhere down there, I'm sure it's not there now, but there used to be a 3-story white house somewhere close to there. And it was the depot for the stagecoach. And I always knew it as a Thompson old house. And it's been a long time. All I remember was just a plain 3-story white house.
Is that the Asbury Thompson house?
And it came up there, and then the stagecoach went up the Howard Gap Road, the way the interstate goes now. And it went right through, if you know where the Blue Ridge Fire Department, which is next door to where I live, it went right through where that fire station is now, and right through the middle of my barn.
The Howard Gap Road ran right.
And the old road bed is still there at my barn. And my kids, when they were growing up, found arrowheads. But that road bed is still there. You've seen it. And it went on down and hit Mud Creek, and the depot in Hendersonville for the stagecoach was this building they call I can't tell you the name of the man that had it, but it's the only thing dividing it and the old courthouse is 2nd Avenue. But it's right on the corner beside the old courthouse. And the fellow I did a lot of work for, his dad was the ticket agent. And he used to tell me a lot about how they let the people out at the depot, drive around to the back, because they underneath had a basement, and they had fresh team of horses to put on, and then bring them back around, load the people back up, and go on to Asheville. And he said the driver, of course, you know, his dad was a ticket agent, and the driver would let him drive. He thought he was driving, but he had the reins, and he said he thought he was really it.
Your mic under your arm, because I'm afraid it's gonna. Let me put this right under your arm like that.
But he used to tell me that many a time, how he let him drive it back one way or the other. But they kept fresh horses underneath, and they've got some kind of a restaurant, I think, under there now. But if you ever go by there, you look and you can see where there's a basement under that. If you go that road between the old courthouse and the building I'm talking about, it's a basement, and that's where they kept the horses.
That's fascinating.
Ronnie, tell us the story about your mother and that involvement of the old Morris place.
Well, after he died, I can remember when I was small, the mama knew the house, the old cabin would eventually cave in and rot away. And she thought it would be nice as a historical site to dismantle that cabin and bring it uptown and put it where the old tennis courts was. It was dirt over there. And she tried and tried to get support for it, and even wrote a senator, maybe a congressman. And she got some letters back. They couldn't help her, couldn't get any funds or anything, but she wanted to save it. And but
Was she city clerk at that time?
she may have been. I don't remember.
I know
Cause she'd
she
been
was city clerk.
she'd been city clerk, postmistress,
Beauty shop.
Restaurant. She is a practical nurse. She'd probably give everybody in the county shots. I can remember opening the refrigerator to get me some milk or something, and over on one side there'd be a whole bunch of different bottles of penicillin and stuff. Back then you could get prescriptions, and they'd bring them to Mom. And then when their shot was due, they'd come to the house, and Mom would take them in the bedroom and give them a shot.
Now, where were you living then?
Allen 176.
And that was across from
Across from
Road?
Frost Road.
Is the house still standing?
Yeah. Can't hardly see it now from the road. Last time I went by, they've got trees and stuff growing up where it used to be a lawn cleared out.
Okay.
But they have people in and out there, especially in the wintertime. Everybody's sick, and they'd show up. She'd give them a shot, and they'd go take off.
Tell me your mother's name again.
Alice Anders Johnson.
Anders.
Yeah.
Anders.
Yeah.
Johnson. And you said she was city clerk?
Yep.
Here in Saluda, city clerk? Okay, so she must have come after Aunt Cece. Lucille
She
Robertson?
was before Lucille.
So she was before Lucille Robertson.
Yeah. I remember when Lucille Robinson was.
That's my great aunt.
Oh, is it?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, so she came before.
You was talking about she worked in the post office. I'll never forget something that happened true. I went in there one day and she was laughing, and Mr. Cooper, he was the postmaster. I don't know what, Charles Cooper's daddy, and they were just dying laughing. And I asked them what was so funny. Somebody come up for the summer, like a lot of people do, and he came in there and came up to the window, and Mom asked him if she could help him. And he says, "Lady, what time does the 5 o'clock train run?" And Mama said, "If it's not late, it'll be at 5 o'clock. But you know, the train, one came up, 27 and 28 came in, and they'd odd hip, I think it was, brought the mail from the depot up to the post office. And that's how they got the mail.
Well, I remember.
Huh?
I remember laying in the bed in the summertime with all the windows open at night, and I could hear that old steam engine come up the mountain. And you could tell when it topped the mountain, it'd slowly get a little faster and a little faster and a little faster as it's getting more of the cars over the top of the mountain. And something funny about that, my daddy told me one time when he was a teenager that he went down right below Raymond Stephenson's service station, slipped down there with a bucket of lard and greased the tracks.
Seems I've heard that story before.
But I know one thing, that you can ride, as I say, I rode from Melrose up to Saluda to the top of the hill here in the helper with my father-in-law. And you could feel that engine push every time those drivers turned over. And about my Uncle Lonnie, he run the safety switch, one of the shifts, but I don't know whether you know where that is or not. Anyway, we got along about there, and all of a sudden we almost stopped. And what is happening, my father-in-law said that the guy in the engine they were pushing, the train they were pushing, he kind of throttled, he let it down and let the helper do all the work. And they almost stalled. If they'd have stalled, they'd had to went all the way back to Melrose. Start over.
Did they literally have to back down the
Yeah,
mountain?
if they stalled, yeah. But when the engineer on the train saw that it was about to stall, he started giving it more power, and it came on up top. But you could feel that engine, them drivers turned over. Every time they turned over, you could feel that engine push.
Another interesting story is the story of Billy's father when he died. One of you tell us about that?
I mean, my daddy died. Well, he ran, it was the last building on Main Street. I don't know what it is now. He had a meat market. And Jim Brock worked for him, kind of, you know, delivery and so forth. And he had put a penny behind the pews till he got a pews put.
Everybody done that back then. I can remember. I can remember doing it at the house.
When they had a storm, this is about 4 or 5 months before I was born, and they had a storm, electrical storm, and a 4400 crossed the power line going into the market. And when he touched the meat, he was going to grind some sausage. And when he touched that meat grinder, which was metal, it knocked him backwards into the floor, broke every bone in his body. But the Charlie Ward had that, what do you call it, the table he cut meat on, what do you call that? You know the thing, that round thing.
Chopping
That was my daddy, chopping block, yeah. And he had got it from Switzerland, I think. And Charlie, daddy bought it after my daddy died. But that was one my daddy had, the chopping block. And it may still be down there.
Who's got it now?
Mr. Baumberger brought it from Switzerland.
Oh, yeah.
But
Chopping block might be in Judy Ward's house.
It is.
I think
But,
When Charlie sold the store, he took the block out.
but
Tell me your father's name one more time.
my same as mine. I'm just a junior.
That's right, you're a junior, okay. And he had it was a meat market.
Yeah.
And you're talking about the very last store on far into town.
The last building on Main Street. I don't know whether it's still there or
See the
not.
brick building then?
It's about from where M.A. Pace's store was, about 3 or 4 stores down.
Well, I can talk with you.
Oh, okay, I wondered.
It's before you get to where the present post office is.
Western Auto.
Right.
Yeah.
Down on
Right on
the
the corner.
I've got some pictures of him standing in front of the store.
I'd like to make a copy of those pictures. I'd like to make a copy of that picture sometime.
Okay.
If you gather it together, we'll scan. Anyway, the camera's back on, so let's see. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, the Charlie Ward he was talking about was Roy's daddy. He was working on the railroad, and Roy had a son named Charlie. Judy's husband was named after his grandfather.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's talk a bit. You mentioned earlier about the ESSO service station. Can you tell us that story about Raymond Stephenson and your first credit?
I was in there, and I can't remember if I out of gas or the car was low on oil. I needed some gas or oil one, and I didn't have any money. I was about 16, I guess, and so I was going to walk. It's about a mile to the house, and I was just going to walk to the house. And Mr. Stephenson said, "You don't have to walk." Said, "I'll just charge it." Said, "You can pay me later." And I thought, charge it? He said, He said, don't worry. He said, I know you, Daddy. I know. He was pretty good friends with Daddy. And he said, I know you, Daddy. I know where you live. Said, I'm not worried about it. So he gave me about 50 or 60 cents worth of credit. And about a week later, I scrounged up enough money to go back down there and pay him, but that was my first credit.
That was at the ESSO station where the,
Right down there at the top of the train
where the
track.
Green River Adventures.
Did you know his
Yeah.
brother Walter?
No.
He played with the Detroit Tigers in the World Series in
White Sox.
1949.
White Sox.
White
Huh?
Sox.
White Sox.
That's right, White Sox, yeah.
Yeah.
But I remember when home plate was over on the ball field and center field was looking toward Main Street. I seen him hit one, and it hit the highway, and it rolled all the way to Stephenson Station. I'll never forget it. But he hit it, and he hit it. When he hit the road, it just kept bouncing, 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 and bounced all the way to the service station.
Well, did he ever hit a long one?
That was
But
Walter Stephenson, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think about that a lot.
You know,
But you know,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
you know how we all have tempers and so forth, but his temper got him out of. He couldn't control his temper, and he didn't last too long in the baseball. But I've seen him do something I've never seen another person do. I've seen him stay down. You know how catchers always squatted down, so to speak. His knees almost touching the ground. I've seen him throw a bullet to second base and never come up. I've never seen that before or since.
Yeah, he was a catcher, that's right.
But he had an arm on him that, I'm telling you, man, but he could throw that ball. He didn't throw it this way, he threw it this way. And he could do it without coming up.
He played for a number of years, and he played for another pro team. And right now, I just can't think what the team was. I've got his record, though.
Well, whatever happened to Raymond Jr.?
What happened to Raymond Jr.?
Is he dead?
He passed away in 1999.
That's her daddy.
Oh, well, what about his sister?
She just passed away.
She has?
She just passed away, and she was buried in into August.
A couple months.
She's buried up here in the Saluda.
Yeah.
Oh,
And Joe Raymond.
I missed
There
it.
too.
Yeah, he's buried up there too. Yeah.
Right. Of all the things, right beside my mother and father-in-law.
Oh, really? They're next to them? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
The Joe Raymond and Lucille Ann and Raymond is right here, and right there is my mother and father-in-law.
Didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. And of course, my mom and dad about 30 feet away.
And then, you know, Lucille Robertson and Fred Robertson are right
Oh, are they?
backed up to them too,
Okay.
so their feet, sort of, if you want to look at it that way.
Speaking of baseball, I remember there's a family. They were older than me. They lived down in the vicinity, I think, of Melrose. They Heatherly, and they was three brothers, Lynn and I forget the other two, and they didn't use a regular baseball bat. They went out in the woods and cut them a hickory tree, sampling, and cut it to fit their hand, and they could mortally lose a baseball. They knocked more lights out of the old gymnasium when the home plate was over there next to the road. I remember that Ed Johnson would take up collection to pay for the glass, because during the game they'd knock out several windows.
So they made do.
Huh?
They made do. They didn't have the money to buy a baseball bat, so
Yeah.
they made one. What do they use for a ball?
But he'd cut it out of a hickory sapling and make it to fit. It didn't like that small grip. They had big hands. And a regular baseball, the grip kind of small, and the fingers wouldn't get a good size. And they'd cut it down to where they could had a big grip. And that hickory sapling, when they caught a baseball, buddy, it's gone. But they knocked out more windows out of the gym.
Me and two of my friends used to do the craziest thing. We didn't have a bat and balls and all, and we'd, when we walk home from school, we'd find a beer can or two on the side of the road, and we'd take it, and I'd cut a little old sapling, and we'd go down in the cow pasture, me and Harold Johnson and David Fowler, and we'd get down in our cow pasture, and we'd start out, we'd hit that can a few times, and after you hit it a few times, it'd kind of wad up and kind of get round like. But we'd get down there, and one would pitch and one would play out in the field, and the other one would hit till we'd get 3 outs on him, and then we'd put rocks for bases. And boy, that was rough on your hands catching that wadded up beer can. But we'd play down there and used a beer can and a stick.
You said you put rocks for bases?
Yeah.
And you say as a cow pasture?
You had to be careful where you stepped.
I just wonder if you slid into second base. It wasn't wrong.
That's one thing you didn't do. You don't slide.
Brother, we talked about your mom. Tell us about your dad.
Well, like I say, his mama died when he was real little.
I thought it was childbirth.
What?
I thought she died at childbirth.
I don't think so.
I knew it was close to it. It wasn't long after you was born.
May was, I think, about a year, maybe a year old when she died.
Is she still living?
No.
Oh, what is her daughter at?
They're all of them's dead.
They are?
Daughters and all. But Daddy was, he went to school in Saluda, and one interesting thing he told me, you know, we had a senior trip. When I was a senior in high school, we went to Washington, D.C., and I think my sister, when she was a senior, they went to Washington and Natural Bridge, Virginia. My dad told me where they went for their trip in school. They packed, all of them brought their lunch packed to school that one morning, and they walked to Pot Shoals. had a picnic,
field trip, huh?
and had a picnic and come back to school.
Your daddy was a paint contractor.
He was a painter,
So was Billy.
an electrician, and he built, from parts that he ordered, he built the first radio that was ever in Saluda or anywhere around. And he'd laugh and tell how the old people would come to town on the weekend and come in his service station to hear the radio. They wanted to see that radio. And some of them, he said, even got up, they'd go around and look behind the counter because they thought somebody was hiding back there talking. They couldn't believe it. And then, of course, things like the World Series or something like that, boy, they'd crowd in there and listen to it.
So around what year was that when he built that radio?
Probably late 20s, I guess.
Elevator station.
Yeah, he had the station, which was right down here.
Next door.
Yeah, that's when the depot was, where the depot was supposed to be.
That reminds me, I've been up from that station. The creek runs under all the stores in town, and I've been under there. Where he had his wash rack, I've been down, I guess, about as far as where the old post office was.
Now, so what station was that? What kind of
It
station?
was a Texaco.
Texaco.
Yeah.
So was that the same time that ESSO was there, and was this all, because I know at one time there were several service stations in Saluda.
Well, I'm not sure I don't know.
That picture is in our current calendar of Saluda.
Yeah, of Daddy's service station.
Yeah.
And he's the one wearing the Texaco hat.
So was that, though, around the same time frame all these other stations were open, or was that
It
before?
may have been before. Didn't you tell me Daddy run that a station to start with down here?
Right down here past where the depot is when you start down the hill on the left.
What wound up was Glenwood Grocery when I was a
It was
teenager.
ESSO station.
And I can remember a time or two as a kid, I'd run out of BBs on Sunday afternoon. I'd be down there shooting at stuff and run out of BBs and beg Mom and Daddy to let me walk to town. I'd walk from the house down to Glenwood Grocery. That's the only thing that was open Sunday afternoon. And it was a little amp. She had a couple of pumps, Amoco gas. And I'd go down there and buy a nickel pack of BBs and walk back to the house.
Where exactly is that? Was that? Which building? Is it still there?
No, it's...
The building's gone.
It's right where Maxine building is on the
okay.
Another thing I'd like you to tell about your daddy is the singing schools.
Oh yeah, he taught singing schools all around.
Singing?
Singing school. He
Shape note singing.
Shape notes. And he wrote some songs. They were in James D. Vaughn songbook, gospel hymns, but he taught singing school.
Who came every summer and stayed at your house?
Oh yeah, one of the big wigs in the Vaughn Publishing Company, Adger M. Pace, would come in August and stay 2 weeks, I think. And boy,
So that he could be with your father?
it's kind of a vacation for him and be with Daddy, and they'd go to singings and different things.
He come to homecoming at Mountain Page because his grandparents were members of Mountain Page.
Oh, okay.
Well, what kind of singing was it?
Gospel singing.
Gospel singing.
Yeah.
I had something, I guess, I don't know if anybody else had the experience I had, kind of an oddity. I was born out the old home place, Anders' home place out, place called Shaw's Creek. It's just before you get to Hawthorne Hills, if you know where that is. Anyway, it's about 3 miles out of Hendersonville on Bavard Road. And just around the bend was a place called Brightwater. And they had the old school there, one big room, from the 1st to the 7th grade, and one teacher. And the teacher would go rotate around the room, give lessons. And I went to the 1st grade there, but the oddity of the thing, the name of the school, it was called Yale. And the reason it was named Yale, the first banker in Hendersonville was named Yale, and he lived on the hill right across the road. And the train going from Hendersonville to Bavard, they had little stations along the railroad track, and the one down there from where the school was, they called it Yale Station, and it was just a shelter and a bench. So what are we going to name the school? Well, that's Yale. Yale, we'll just name it Yale. And I had a first cousin who graduated from there from the 7th grade. And he never heard of Yale University. But when he graduated, the war started. And he didn't want to go interested in fighting. He went to Baltimore, Maryland, and got a job in an airplane factory, making airplanes. And he retired now it's been about 30 years ago, he's dead now, but he retired about 30 years ago and came back to Hendersonville as executive vice president of the company. But when he filled out the form for a job, name, age, and so forth, where'd you go to school? Yale. Did you graduate? Yes. Can you read blueprints? Well, before he went to Baltimore, he worked with his uncles building houses and reading blueprints. And they put him to reading blueprints on the plane, and he retired as executive vice president of the company. With a 7th grade education.
Yale, didn't he?
Huh?
He told the truth, didn't he?
Yeah.
But he had never heard of Yale University. But he retired as executive vice president with a 7th grade education.
Another fact about your daddy was And your whole family was, they were very active in Saluda Baptist Church.
Yeah,
And for years and years, your dad was song leader.
yeah.
Your mother was a Sunday school teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And
When they were building the Baptist church, Daddy donated a lot of time working, and on Saturdays I'd go with him when he was wiring. He done a lot of the wiring in the church for free, and I can remember going on Saturday morning with him and helping him, and that's when you'd heat the sorter in a little old, you'd have a rod with a little cup on it, and you heat it with the blowtorch, and then dip the wires you had twisted for the junction box, dip it in that sorter and solder them all together. But I helped him a lot of times on Saturdays when we'd work in the church.
And Raymond Pace helped a lot too, didn't he?
Oh yeah.
Raymond and Roy.
Do you have any of your dad's music on record or
I've got some of his songbooks
songbooks?
that has some songs in it.
You don't have any recordings of his singing?
No.
And anything like that?
The only recordings they had was on an old. It was actually before vinyl. I think these were almost like wax. They were pretty fragile, and somewhere along the line, I guess they just disintegrated.
And your granddaddy was on there playing the fiddle.
He played the banjo.
I mean the banjo.
Yeah.
Because I remember your mama.
But I can remember, Grandpa played the banjo, and Daddy played the guitar, and Mama could play the clarinet, I think a clarinet, saxophone.
Mm-hmm.
And could she play the piano?
No, that was Lotto's wife,
Okay.
Pearl.
But I can remember at Christmas time, it may have been Christmas Eve or right before Christmas, the church used to have a group that would go out and sing Christmas carols. And Daddy'd take his guitar, and him and Mom would take off, and they'd go out. And of course I was all excited. I couldn't go to sleep because it's Christmas time, and I was just a nervous wreck. And I'd get in the bed. My sister, Julianne, she put me to bed about 9 o'clock. And going to sleep was out of the question. I was wide awake.
Were you the baby in the family?
Yes, I was.
Oh, speaking of music, I'm still in it.
You're still, I was going to ask, do either one of you sing?
I played in the Hendersonville Symphony Orchestra and the community band, and I still play in the Buddy K band.
What do you play?
Trombone. I don't really swallow it.
I mainly just played hooky. I started out, Mama started me taking piano lessons, and I hated it. There again, I wish now I went ahead.
Tell us about your sister.
Oh, Julianne. Yeah, she was, she said the coach thought she was a real good basketball player, but she messed up her knee.
Now this is, say your full name so that people...
Julia Johnson. And her knee, she hurt it in a game, and then it got to where it would just fly out with her. Her kneecap would jump. So she wound up just being a cheerleader. And when she got out of high school, she went to Washington, D.C. and went to work with the FBI. And that's where she met her future husband. He's from Jake Mullis. He's originally from Hawkinsville, Georgia.
He was an agent.
Yeah, he was working with the FBI, and that's where they met in Washington. And
Speaking of music, I've been, in the 6th grade here, I started taking music, playing the trombone, and I'm still playing it. And I never had the desire or thought or anything of writing music. And this is not melodramatic or anything, it's just something that happened. The Almighty told me one day, you can read music, but I want you to write a hymn. I said, well, I don't know where to start. And there was no words spoken. It was back and forth in my mind. And he says, you start by picking up a paper and a pencil. I picked up a paper and a pencil. Before I knew it, I had 2 verses, words and music. But I couldn't get the 3rd verse. And I asked him one night, what happened to my 3rd verse? Is this something I just thought I should do and I was wrong? And I went to bed, and I woke up at about 3 o'clock. I wasn't hurting. I had no reason to wake up. No problem, nothing. So, but on the wall was the 3rd verse.
A miracle.
I wrote it down, went back to sleep in 5 minutes. And the next day I got the 4th verse. And I've still got it. I haven't published it. I did make some tapes of it. But the title of it, he gave me the name, the title, the music, and the words. Eternity is just a heartbeat away, is the name of it. And the 3rd verse, I will never forget. What it is, if you know the Master not, and he lives not in your heart, don't wait any longer to seek him ere you depart. But do not forget, as you travel each day, eternity is just a heartbeat away.
Wonderful.
As far as being here, do you want to talk about any particular people?
I remember just talking about Lola Ward. I walked to town and back, and I was always picking up drink bottles. And you could cash in Pepsis and Coke and RC. And she wouldn't take brownies. She didn't want brownie drinks, and she didn't. And knee highs, I don't think she'd take that. But the others, you could get 3 cents a piece. And that's how I get my spending money there. And then I'd go down to M.A. Pace's, because they had this huge candy counter. And you could get 2 packs of kits for a penny. And I could get a big old sack of candy for 10 to 15 cents. And I would hoard that stuff and eat a little bit at a time, make it last just as long as I could.
Now, who would be working in there when you went in M.A. Pace's?
Lola. Oh, in M.A.? Boo or Robert Hugh.
Eunice.
Yeah. Nolan run they had a little service station outside. Yeah. Had some gas pumps, and Nolan was usually taking care of that. And I remember when I first, I don't know, late at 12 or so, I got to hunting. My daddy, he wouldn't let me have out with a gun by myself till I got about 12 or 13 years old, and I'd been with them a bunch of times. But I'd save up a few cents, and I'd go down to Lowe's, because they sold shotgun shells. And I can remember going in there with 15 or 20 cents and buying 3 or 4 shotgun shells. Charlie or Jack would break the box, open the box, and they'd sell me 2 or 3 shotgun shells, what I needed. And
you had to save those shots, didn't you?
Yeah. And see, you can't do anything like that today. You either buy the box or go home without it.
Ronnie, tell us a little bit about your other brother.
Oh, Robert.
Bob?
Yeah. Yeah, he plays the piano. Him and my sister Julianne both are good on the piano. And my brother he preached for about 20-something years. And he's retired now and lives in Woodruff, South Carolina.
And He worked in Hendersonville.
Oh yeah, he worked for Rigby Marr, worked for GE for a while. He's worked all over, and he kind of moved when he got called to another church or something. He moved, switched jobs, but he graduated from Western Carolina when it was Western Carolina College in I think it was 58. No. Yeah.
One thing I remember about him when he was in service, he played the organ in Germany for a church service.
He was a chaplain's assistant, and he went with the chaplain. When they went on maneuvers or on an alert or anything, he carried what he called a grease gun. It's a little submachine gun, and went with the chaplain. Wherever the chaplain went, he went with it.
And several churches called him back twice or 3 times.
Yeah. He'd been at Zion Hill a couple of times.
Zion Hill, wasn't he there twice?
Yeah.
And down in Chesney?
Yeah, and down next below Inman, down in there, down right. Yeah, it's out from Campobello.
Yeah.
Out there, little in the country. I can't remember.
You talking about that church remind me of the story I heard about the preacher and the music director wasn't getting along too well. And they were just like that. And so the preacher got through preaching, and he asked people to come up, give their hand, and join the church and repent while they had a song. And what does the music director lead? But just like a tree that's planted by the water, I shall not be moved, and nobody moves. Well, that didn't sit too well with the preacher. The next Sunday he preached on tithing. And when he got to, asked the leader number, and what does the music director lead? Jesus paid it all to him. Well, that really got the preacher. The next Sunday, he preached on gossip. And what does the music director lead? I love to tell the story. Well, the preacher jumped up and says, I resign, I leave, I quit. Jesus brought me here, and Jesus will take me somewhere else. And what does the music director lead? What a friend we have in Jesus.
Well, listen, on that note, what advice do you all have for the new folks that are moving into Saluda? What advice do you have to them about Saluda?
About Saluda? I don't think at the level, I take time to think on that.
Do you think they should leave it as it is?
Yeah. I can't think of anything right now, it's too short a notice, but can you?
Well, that seems to be, I've seen it happen in Henderson County. The people that come here, for some reason, they had a reason they liked it and wanted to come, and then it seems like as quick as they get here, they want to change it.
Yeah, well, I'll agree to that. Oh, I forgot that.
Why did you come in the first place? If you wanted something different, why didn't you go find it? Why? If you liked it enough to come here, maybe you should just leave it alone.
Good advice.
Okay. Is there anything else you all would like to add about your...
Well, a footnote to that, and plus to go along with it, I'm not just talking about Saluda or Hendersonville, I'm talking about the United States, the whole world, if you want to broad the span. I remember as a kid, the murders and crimes and bad earthquakes. We was talking about it coming down here. We had them, but nothing like today. I feel the Almighty lets them happen to try to get people to come back to His way of wanting us to live. And the closest I think that the country has ever come to that was a 911. For about a month, it was God and country, and then it just faded away. But I still say today that those things happen to try to get people to come back. And the only thing I'm concerned about, if they'll get worse, just like the Philippines, they've had the worst typhoon in history. And that proves to me they're going to get worse. And I think it'd be nice if the people would understand that people think they can get by with stuff because nobody sees them do it. And that they're actually dumb when they try that phase, because He knows. He even knows how many hair in their head. I mean, but how they just don't put two and two together.
But the Lord's still in control.
But I don't know which way you'd go to try to get them to move. But
one thing my wife wanted me to tell on my daddy was when Franklin Roosevelt got reelected. maybe
I remember that. I lived through that.
maybe for the fourth time, I'm not sure. But him and Q.C. Sonner, who lived over there across from the ball diamond, they made plans they was going to celebrate when he won. And they went up on the hill above Saunders, up there somewhere near where Daddy grew up, on Shan Hill. And they took 2 bundles of 10 sticks of dynamite each, and were going to hang them in a tree and set them where one would go off, and then in just a minute or two the other.
The 10 would go off first.
Yeah. And then, oh, that's right, it was 10 in one bundle and 20 in another. So Daddy was supposed to rig it, and Sonner was back down at his house with his family.
No, it was Cooper, wasn't it?
Well, Cooper, I'm not sure.
Cooper, it was him and Cooper. Cooper lived on the hill right across from the ball field.
And Daddy rigged it up, and he messed up. And
he couldn't get it lit, it was raining.
The whole thing went off at one time, busted every window out of Cooper's house, and he grabbed his wife and young'uns and run out the door and didn't even stop to get in his car and went running towards Saluda. And he said, Lord have mercy, if that's a 10, I don't want to be here when the 20.
What happened? The 20 went off first.
Well, the whole thing went.
Yeah. Anyway, he said if it.
There wasn't no tree.
He got his radio and his family and headed for town.
Okay. Well, we'll end up.
You know where the Shan Hill is over there close behind where he lived? That's where his dad was at.
And Roy Lee's wife grew up here too. And they all graduated from Saluda High School.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what's her name?
Peggy Jones Johnson.
She related to George Jones, the historian in Hendersonville?
Yep. She's a cousin, distant cousin.
It's kind of like I was telling you about the woman who was on the airplane 8 miles up on a commercial plane. And she was reading the Bible. The man across the aisle said, "What are you reading?" She says, "The Bible." He says, "You don't believe all them fairy tales in there, do you?" She says, "I sure do." He says, "What about the one where the man was swallowed by a whale and 3 days spit up on dry ground? Do you believe all that stuff?" She said, "You're talking about Jonah." So in the first place, it wasn't a whale, it was a fish, and it's a special fish. And says, as a matter of fact, when I get to heaven, I intend to talk to Jonah about that very thing, see what it was like to live in the stomach of a fish for 3 days. The man says, supposing Jonah didn't make it to heaven. She said, then you talk to him.
With some good old Mountain Dew. My brother Bill runs a still on the hill where he'll run you a gallon or two. The buzzards in the sky get so drunk that they can't fly from the fumes of that good old Mountain Dew. They call it that good old Mountain Dew. And them that refuse it are few. Oh, hush up my mug if you'll fill up my jug with some good old Mountain Dew. Just down the road is an old holler stump where you lay down $1 or two. You go around the bend when you come back again. There's a jug of that good old Mountain Dew. My Uncle Lord, he is sawed off real short, measures about 4'2". But he thinks he's a giant when you give him a pint of that good old Mountain Dew. The mayor's wife got a brand new perfume, and it has such a sweet smelling pew. Imagine her surprise when she had it analyzed. It was nothing but that good old Mountain Dew.
You talking about chills you had, going back to my dad being killed, my aunt, his sister, Anna Ward, she read something in the Bible. I'm a third or fourth time, I read it every morning as a verse. But I've read it nearly through, either 3 or 4 times. But I've never found out what she read. It's something about anybody that hadn't seen their earthly father will have power that nobody else has. And what that is, she told me what to do. My cousin had to thresh as a baby. And I blew in the mouth. The Almighty healed it. And she told me what to do, and I blew in the mouth, the baby was healed. And that fellow I worked with in Hendersonville, this has been many years ago, hadn't been married too long. He'd heard me talk on the job about this. And his son, who lives in Hendersonville, but he is retired now, works for the telephone company. And one day we couldn't work, it was raining. And he said, will you go out to my house and cure my baby of the thrush? And I said, Mac, I can't, but I know who can. I went out there, and that was the worst case I have ever seen. They were bumps in his mouth, on top of bumps, and they were bleeding. And I was didn't really want to blow in his mouth. He told me, do it. And I carried that baby back and gave it to the mother. And as I looked down at that baby, I could see those bumps bleeding. Now, if you don't think that'll get you thinking.
Wow. You
That's
got some
unreal.
good connections.
Huh?
You got some good connections.
That kind of gets to you.
So you did it twice.
Yeah.
Have you done anything like
I
that
guess
since?
altogether I've blowed in somewhere, not quite a dozen babies.
A lot of people think that's just old wives' tales, don't it? But, yeah,
But I told the mother when I took the baby in the bedroom, said a prayer, blew in his mouth. I said, they had a table full of medicine. The more they give it, the worse it got.
Yeah.
I said, you just take that medicine, take it right out, dump it. She never questioned it. She just took her apron, raked it in there, and figured it out while I was in the bedroom. And when I come back out with it, I almost dropped that baby. But when you look down and see them disappearing,
Wow.
and that was on Friday,
Mm.
and I, Monday morning came to work, I said, Mac, how's the baby? He said, well. I said, when did you notice any change? He said, well, you know, it's about 11 o'clock and I brought you back to town. I said, yeah. He said at 1 o'clock there were 2 little bumps.
That's amazing.
And said by sundown it's all clear.
and they couldn't eat, they couldn't do
No,
nothing.
I know what that stuff is.
But that's something you never, ever forget. I mean, you can still, I can still see those bumps disappear.
Well, you have a lot of faith, or you would not have been
There's
able to
one
receive
thing about it,
that.
nobody can tell me he don't exist.
Oh, no, no. Absolutely. Okay.
I
Would
got
you all
a-
need
I
to
got a
get some
sequence.
break or some water? We've got some water in here.
I'm not trying to build myself up, but I'll give you a sequence to that.
Okay.
He was retired, he's been dead a long time. He was retired Episcopal priest, and he had cancer. He had a real good friend of mine. I'd known him for years. And he had it so bad, he was so weak, he couldn't even get out of the house. He just barely could get around in the house. And he called me up and he asked me to come fix a window, a door, or something, which I went over and did. And I told him what I just told you about, you know, the baby blowing. And I said, do you believe that? He said, absolutely. So I know he does those things. And I started to leave. And then he hit me with something I'd never had happen before. Here was a retired Episcopal priest. And what did he say as I started to leave? But will you put your hands on me? I didn't know what to do. And he told me again, do it. I did. And if I'd have stuck my finger in the light socket, I wouldn't have tingled any more than I did when I did it. That priest, the cancer left him. And he died about, I'd say 15 years ago, playing golf on the golf course with a heart attack.
Back to old Mountain Dew, and them that refuse it are few. I'll hush up my mug if you'll fill up my jug with some good